Okay, this one's controversial, so just disclaimer. This is my opinion. You don't have to agree with it. But the question is, what are bad things to study in college? You know me. I will never give you just a simple, straightforward answer. It depends. I don't think really there is technically a bad thing to study in college. I think any education is good. Um, any development that you put into your intellect, any focused attention on developing as a person, developing your knowledge is good. Um, I think what the question's trying to get at is like, what are some bad things to study, in terms of your future prospects? And still answering that question, um, I kind of disagree that there is such a thing as a bad thing to choose to study. Um, Now, that being said, there are some, fields of study with much more straightforward paths to a career. So the old reliable examples are like engineering, pre-med, pre-law. You could go into, I don't know, education. You can go into teaching, and it's like those areas of study make it very obvious what your path to a career would be. You go to school for an engineer for engineering, you're going to be some sort of engineer. You go to school for pre-law or pre-med, you're going to be some sort of doctor or lawyer. You go to school to be a teacher, you're going to be a teacher, right? It's very obvious what trajectory you take. And in that sense it's good because, you don't have to think too much. You can start from the very beginning when you start your educational journey. You can start making connections that'll help you figure out where in that field you want to end up, what kind of job you want, what you want your career to look like, right? Now, it gets more complicated when you pick a major or like a field of study that has more options. So I'll give you an example. And the example is the English degree, right? Maybe that's the most um, frequently derided, like made fun of degree ever. At least I've heard it a lot because everyone always asks, like, what are you going to do with an English degree, right? Are you going to teach? If you're not going to teach, what are you going to do? Because people see it as like a useless degree. What are you going to do with that? Now, I already told you, I don't think it's a useless degree in the sense that, like, you're learning stuff and that's useful. That's worth mentioning. But I would also say it's not useful. It's not useless in the sense that you can't get any other job other than teaching. Um, it's the approach that makes it useful or useless. So what do I mean by the approach you take? So if you say, well, I like English. I just like English. I like reading. I like literature, whatever. That's why I'm getting my degree in English. If that's your reason for getting that degree, it's going to be very difficult for you to then find a career after if you don't know what that career is. Now, if you go the other way around, though, if you start with your goal in mind, your career, your ideal position, if you start with that, then you work backwards and you figure, okay, what degree do I need to make that happen? If it happens to be an English degree, well, now getting that degree is just one part in the plan of getting to where you want to go. So, say for instance, I wanted to be an editor. I wanted to read books, submissions, and then I wanted to develop those books into being ready for market, and then I want to like market those books. I want to, promote authors, whatever. Well, how do you do that? Well, one of the major steps is you go to college for English. But once you're there, even within an English degree, there are other specialties that you can kind of pick and choose. There's people you can choose to work with. There's classes you can choose to take. There are extra programs in the summer that you can apply to, internships you can apply to. All of this will increase your chances in finding that path, or following that path into your desired career, right? So in that case, the English degree is great. Now, what if you wanted to be a journalist, though? A lot of journalists love literature. A lot of journalists love reading. A lot of journalists love talking about, the decisions authors make. You would think, well, a lot of journalists like that, they should take an English degree and then become a journalist later. But the problem with that approach is that that's not going to help them learn the skills that they need to be the best journalist. It's not impossible, You don't need a journalism degree to become a journalist, but that path becomes much more difficult, right? So start with the goal in mind and then ask yourself, what is the best thing to study to achieve that goal? I'll give you another example. Say you want to own your own business. So a lot of people will think, well, I should get a business degree, right? I want to be a business person, I gotta study business, which makes a lot of intuitive sense. However, that's not always the case. If you want to be a small business owner, sure, I'm not saying that the education would hurt, but is that the best plan of attack to achieve your goal? It depends, right? Now, if you want to be, if you want a job in like a big corporate financial, company, well, going to business school would be really helpful because you meet people in that field, you learn about what they do, you get a sense of like what specialties you can, learn and which, ways to market yourself. Make it easier to get a job. But if you go to business school without an idea of what you want to do first, well, you're not going to know, what specialty should I take? Which route do I go once I'm here? Now, I'm not saying any of this to scare anybody. If you don't know exactly what you want to do, that's okay, but you need to have a general idea. If you know you want to be an engineer, then go into engineering. You don't need to know what type of engineer you want to be yet. You'll take many classes, you'll learn about the different specialties, and then as you progress, you'll start to narrow in, right? If you want to go into business, you don't need to know the difference between finance necessarily and marketing. I mean, you probably should, but it's not as important. You can pick that later. But don't go in and just think, I like this, so I'm going to study it. At least in my opinion, college is too expensive to do that. If college were free and time were an issue and money isn't an issue, then yeah, go ahead and just study whatever you want to study. Like, that's the dream, right? If I could be a student for the rest of my life and be paid for it, I would do that. But if you're going to college in order to establish a career, then you need to figure out what that career is, and you need to figure out what the best plan of action is to take. If you do that, there's no such thing as a bad degree. There's no such thing as a bad thing to study. If you don't do that, well, anything could be a bad thing to study. Sorry I can't give you such an easy answer, but there it is.